coming up on this edition of Southwest TV News. Swift Current City RCMP got a surprise this week while conducting a routine probation check. The male youth in question was on probation for previous charges from the summer of 2018.
Pretty much the majority of cases that have occurred are unvaccinated or only partially vaccinated.
As reports of increased measles cases across North America continue to make the headlines, people of all ages are once again being reminded of the importance of vaccinations through all stages of life. The story of Canada's Old West is one of great interest to many, and local historian Hugh Henry has undertaken extensive research into the role of Fort Walsh and the Northwest Mounted Police. Recently speaking to a crowd at the Swift Current Museum, he says his research into the topic started with why the Northwest Mounted Police began their march west. Thanks for joining us here today. A Swift Current youth is now in custody following an arrest earlier this week. We have more in today's top story. Swift Current City RCMP got a surprise this week while conducting a routine probation check. The male youth in question was on probation for previous charges from the summer of 2018, when a pipe bomb was discovered near the Swift Current Library. And now on Tuesday, after police entered a residence on Clinton Place, they discovered a small amount of crystal meth and more.
Upon knocking on the door, he didn't respond. Another member of the residents or family answered the door, not knowing if this individual was there, and the members could hear music coming from his bedroom, so they attended his bedroom, found another improvised explosive device. They consulted with our explosive disposal unit, secured the area, and then backed out until we could get a search warrant and search the residence. And during that time, the individual returned at about 8:45 yesterday morning. He attempted to run from one of our members, our police dog service unit, who chased him through a field for a short distance where he was apprehended.
The male youth, who cannot be named due to his age, made his first appearance in Swift Current Provincial Court on Tuesday and has been remanded in custody. He'll appear via video link from Regina for his next provincial court date on March 6th. As more cases of measles are being reported across North America, health officials are again reminding you of the importance of vaccinations. As reports of increased measles cases across North America continue to make the headlines, people of all ages are once again being reminded of the importance of vaccinations through all stages of life.
To make sure you're up to date with your children's immunizations, because pretty much the majority of cases that have occurred are unvaccinated or only partially vaccinated. And literally most of the vaccinated cases have not had any issues. I guess the other side of the coin is that sometimes we get shot in the foot or shoot ourselves in the foot by doing such a good job with vaccinations that you don't really see the cases circulating. If you talk to a lot of people who were around during the times when vaccines were not available or not yet developed, they really remember all these diseases and how severe they were.
And if you're traveling abroad, further precautions should be taken to protect yourself, as measles and other illnesses are easily spread through the confined spaces of airplanes and other sources.
Pretty much any tourist attraction will have people from all over, and you cannot predict, whether they're carrying illness and what level of protection they have. And at the same time, even if you don't travel, people can bring the illness back with them without knowing. And so it's still very important, whether you're traveling or not traveling, to have that immunization.
More information on vaccinations in general are available through your family physician or pharmacist.
I'm Zane Wilcox. I'm a sculptor living and working in Regina, Saskatchewan, and I'm here with my representing gallery, Slate Gallery. There's always different things that draw our attention away from the immediate sphere where we are, and I want my work to be a distillation of strong elements of visual perception. So form, material, I tend to work with pretty rich textured materials or really intense colors. So I intend the work as a presentation of those as an opportunity for people to maybe take a step away from the distractions, just even if it's for a moment, and focus their attention on that object back in the place where they are. This is a fairly new body of work that I've started building last year. The materials are paint on plywood, and then technique. I had to develop ways to make those nice, beautiful concentric circles and get them all sandwiched together. Color is kind of the central interest for me, so presenting very intense colors in close proximity to each other, and so kind of making those colors pop and the different relationships between the colors that you wouldn't necessarily normally see together. So there is still depth there rather than being just, say, on a flat canvas. There's still depth, and so there's that spatial aspect where as you maybe walk around a room and see it from different angles, there are different effects that happen, even though it's fairly shallow relief, where some of the rings that the color are on will get narrower and narrower from some vantage points. And then also light factors into it, because there is that depth and the undercuts and the overlapping under different lighting conditions. It will present in different ways as well.
The story of the March West was the focus of a special presentation at the Swift Current Museum. We find out more in this report. The story of Canada's Old West is one of great interest to many, and local historian Hugh Henry has undertaken extensive research into the role of Fort Walsh and the Northwest Mounted Police. Recently speaking to a crowd at the Swift Current Museum, he says his research into the topic started with why the Northwest Mounted Police began their march west.
Well, it was really to solidify Canadian, ownership of Western Canada, the Western lands, which were quite unknown to the federal government and many of Easterners at the time. And there were things like American whiskey traders coming across the line to sell liquor to the natives and so on. And also a concern that the larger migration of Americans west would spill over into Canadian territory. And once they had established themselves in whatever capacity, that would be more difficult to sort of deal with them and getting them back across the line. So the federal government then was really concerned and gave it a priority to have some presence in the West. And the North Mounted Police were one aspect of that, to maintain law and order and to sort of show the flag and show the Canadian presence.
And as he delved further into his research, he discovered diaries kept by those on the front lines, giving a first-hand account of what life was like during the March West.
One of them was Fred Bagley, who was a 15-year-old bugler, and he had a diary, and he was very detailed in terms of his descriptions, including how many miles he traveled every day. And that intrigued me because that would allow me then to map their trek day to day across Saskatchewan, and then also the reference to landmarks that I was familiar with or could find out the present day names for them. So I did all that and put together then the narrative from Bagley, the day-to-day accounts, his description of the land and what was happening day to day, and then was able to trace the route through Saskatchewan. Some of the hardships that they had to endure, they hadn't planned, the leaders of the expedition hadn't planned for a lot of the day-to-day things like food, and the fact that the horses that were with them weren't necessarily accustomed to eating the prairie grass, or the fact that there was very little water, good water, sloughs and so on certainly, but a lot of them muddied by the presence of bison, or a lot of them alkali as well. So it could have been a series of dry years at that time as well that the landscape was certainly harsh for them, and they weren't expecting that.
Hugh Henry's presentation on the March West was further brought into present day through the personal collection of artifacts by local resident Max Morrow, which includes articles of clothing worn by the Northwest Mounted Police to the artillery they were issued to help with peacekeeping efforts.
Well, actually, the piece that's been documented as one of the items that came on the March West was the 1871 Snyder carbine, 57 caliber carbine, single shot. That was carried by the members of the Northwest Mounted Police. Well, it was typical British military issue, and probably very reasonable to purchase at the time. Single shot wasn't too practical in terms of defense, but it was just an evidence to the Plains people that they were armed. They weren't here to fight, but to keep the peace.
A period in Canadian and Southwest Saskatchewan history, which many agree should be kept alive for future generations.
One of those stories that people have in the back of their minds, they've heard about obviously the RCMP, and some of them know that they originated as the Northwest Mounted Police. But this whole idea, I think, of how they got a presence across Canada, and in a sense, where they are today because of that history. But myself, those earlier times are what I like to focus my attention on, sort of the basic building blocks of what we have today. So you sort of work your way back and try to discover what it was that affected maybe the outcomes that resulted, and why decisions were made, and why places were established, whether it's forts or depots or other sorts of things, as part of the business of governing and ruling and policing Western Canada.
The story of the Northwest Mounted Police and the March West is just one of numerous topics under discussion during the ongoing Lunch and Learn series hosted at the Swift Current Museum. Well, this brings to a close another episode of Southwest TV News, reporting the stories that matter to you. We always welcome your news tips. You can always reach us here by phone at our studio or by email to contact us at southwesttvnews.com. Also, be sure to join us daily online for the latest news from across Southwest Saskatchewan and so much more at southwesttvnews.com. And be sure to follow us on a range of social media. Thanks for joining us here today. I'm Carol Andrews.